there's the best players, and then there's the most important players, the most vital to the Green Bay Packers' success in 2025. At least those players not named Jordan Love. America's guest, Jason Hirschhorn, joins me today as we tick down the top 5 most important Green Bay Packers for 2025.
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Packers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Peter Bukowski, and I cover the Packers for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast to iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you find podcasts. You will find Locked On Packers, the #1 Packers podcast on the internet. And the show for fans who know what happened, they want to know why and how. Thanks to everyone who makes Locked On Packers their first listen every day. We hope you like starting your day with us as much as we like starting our day with you. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. On The Leap, we just finished our Ranking the Packers series on the best players heading into 2025 on the eve of training camp. As we're about to see these guys on the field. Jason Hirschhorn, my colleague at The Leap and America's guest, join me to talk about our lists. I give my top 5. He gives his top 5 on the most important players, not just the best, most important players on the Packers for 2025, not named Jordan Love. Joining me now from The Leap, a newsletter we would love for you to subscribe to, America's guest, Jason Hirschhorn. And Jason, we just got finished over at The Leap with our Ranking the Packers series, which was the best players on the Green Bay Packers. I wanted to get into a little bit of a different list here, and that is the most essential, the most important players on the Green Bay Packers for 2025. And because Jordan Love would just be #1 and it would not be an interesting conversation, we're going to do the non-quarterbacks. So the most important non-quarterbacks for the Green Bay Packers for 2025. And we are going to start it with a bang. #1, who is your #1 most essential, most important, most valuable, however we want to phrase it, non-quarterback on this version of the Green Bay Packers?
Well, I think we should define what that term means. And the way I defined it was, unlike on the Leaps list, where we compared every player to where like a replacement level player at that position would be, and judging it off of that, I viewed it as, can you come up with a scenario where the Packers cannot have the player in question and they're not able to sufficiently replace him with those who are already on the roster? So it is more of a value assessment, and, positional value comes into that as well. So my #1 was Xavier McKinney, because I kind of came to it this way, like the threat that he created in like the center back of that defense, like not even just the interception, just the way that he convinced opposing offenses to basically avoid throwing deep on the Packers for the majority of the season, was so incredibly valuable. And it allowed the Packers to do basically all the things you saw them do with coverage the back half of the year. They knew they weren't going to have Jair Alexander, or at least they were pretty confident they weren't going to have Jair Alexander for that period. And they had to make adjustments in terms of like how much cover 2 they were using. Yeah. Certainly this fed into their ability to do sim pressures. And Xavier McKinney allowed for all of it to happen. Like that safety group as a whole allowed them to do what they wanted to the second half of the year on defense. And Xavier McKinney was the most critical piece of that. Like if you take him out, they do have other safeties that they like, but there's not someone back there, at least as we understand them right now, who's going to convince opposing offenses basically to avoid throwing deep on the Packers. And that's why I had him in that top spot.
Okay, so this is frustrating because I thought, conventional wisdom, people would say, Zach Tom, that was the player that I thought you were going to pick. Xavier McKinney is my #1 too. For all of the reasons that you just stated, they just can't play their defense the way that they want to, whether they play a bunch of cover 2 or not, without Xavier McKinney. And so that part of it, to me, when you are that fundamental to the defense, I just feel like he is to their defense what Jordan Love is to their offense in some ways. And so if we're going to take Jordan Love off the list. Now, interestingly about this, Jason, he was also on our qualitative list this high on the list. So this is, I don't know that we're going to follow the same list, the top 5 or top 10. I expect we won't, but I do think this is one of those examples where like he is the best or second best player on this team. And so I kind of think he has to be here almost regardless.
Yeah, like just again, as we had him on the list at the Leap, the number 1 player on the Packers entering the 2025 season. And he really earned that. Like he had easily the best year of his career. And it wasn't like he didn't have a great career prior to arriving in Green Bay. And it is virtually impossible to imagine the Packers with what else happened on that defense last year, with Alexander missing time, with the other injuries in the secondary, with the pass rush not living up to its potential. For them to still have the defense that they had was because of Xavier McKinney more than any other individual player. And without a quality defense, I mean, there were periods of last season where I don't know they would have been able to pull out wins. So yeah, it's kind of hard to come at this and not conclude that Xavier McKinney is that important to the Packers.
Okay. Then let's do number 2. And I would expect we have more divergence as we go down the list, but let's see here. Who's your number 2 player?
So I changed my number 2 and my number 3 multiple times coming up to this, but I'm just going to settle with the one that I currently have, which is Zach Tom. There are multiple members of the offensive line that are really, really, really good. Tom is the one that if they lost for a prolonged period of time, I think they would have the hardest time replacing. He is easily their best tackle. And I think easily at this point, maybe not easily, but he is, I think, definitively their best offensive lineman overall. And he could probably be their best offensive lineman at any of the spots along the unit. Like if Elton Jenkins, let's say hypothetically, does not play a snap this year, you know, you have a variety of options to fill in at center. One of those actually is Zach Tom, if they wanted to. If Rasheed Walker were to go down and Jordan Morgan doesn't step up in that left tackle spot, they could put Zach Tom there. He's done it before. And he can fill in a guard if for whatever reason you need him to. If let's say, turns out Anthony Belton is your 6th best offensive lineman this year, and the best version of the offensive line, if someone goes down along the interior, is to move Tom inside, they could do that. He solves so many problems. And I know it's kind of become this like hipster thing to downplay Tom's contributions in 2024, but you know, you just go back and look at it. Like he had during the regular season 3 sacks and 24 total pressures allowed. Those are insane numbers. It was a 12-game streak where he only allowed 1 sack. And that was against some of their strongest competition, including the first matchup with the Eagles. And this is all coming off of a torn pec that limited what he could do last offseason. So I keep looking at this and thinking that we're actually probably underrating what Tom is, and that maybe what became the offseason conventional wisdom is a little bit of us talking ourselves into narratives, because he is still really, really, really good and is likely to get better now with a full offseason of good health.
Are you ready for this? He's not on my list. He's not
Interesting.
on my list. And he's not on my list, not because he's not a really excellent player, because he is. It is only because they have invested so much at offensive line over the last 2 off seasons that they have at the very least plans in place for if Zach Tom can't play. Jordan Morgan and Anthony Belton, now those are premium picks at the position. Now, I don't want to underrate Zach Tom by saying, well, they just have these players who could just step right in, because we've seen over and over the years, that's not how it works. I just feel like this team, from a total depth standpoint, from a coaching standpoint, from a Matt LaFleur and Jordan Love standpoint, like part of Jordan Love's superpower is he does not take sacks even when he is pressured. Last year, one of the best pressure rates of the last decade in terms of turnover-worthy play rates when pressured, even with some of the issues creating turnovers last year. So even though I think Zach Tom is probably one of the 5 best players on this team, quarterback or not, I feel like if he were to go down, they have replacements that would make me feel good enough about it that he did not land on my list. When I look down the list, these other 4 players that I have, I just go, if they go down, I don't know what they do at that spot to generate that sort of production.
Can I push back on this a little bit?
Sure.
So I do understand that they have a lot of offensive line depth, especially relative to the rest of the league. And I think that logic that you just laid out does hold for every other presumed starter or potential starter along the offensive line. If Rasheed Walker goes down, I mean, I just said Zach Tom, if they wanted to, could step in there. Obviously, they have Jordan Morgan as well. Anthony Belton has taken reps there.
It's because Zach Tom is part of the solution everywhere.
Yeah. I don't know that they can do the same thing with Zach Tom. They have guys that they would presumably turn to. Maybe Belton's the answer there. Maybe it's Jordan Morgan if he ends up not being the starter at left tackle. But those are still question marks. Yeah. We don't have those question marks with Zach Tom. Anthony Belton as a rookie might just not be ready. I mean, that was part of the calculation with him when they drafted him. Jordan Morgan, he might be able to handle right tackle, might be able to handle left tackle. We might not be a tackle at all. Like you have talked about this extensively on the podcast. So I keep coming back to they have things that they like, but not things that they have proven in terms of being able to replace Zach Tom. Whereas the rest of the offensive line, I do think in part because Zach Tom is there, they do have solutions. So I think that he is that key Jenga piece to the unit. Like if he went down for a week or two, I think they would be okay. But if they lost him for like half the year or more, I don't think it would be that easy to replace him unless Anthony Belton ends up being one of those spectacular rookie offensive linemen, which, is possible, but you can't depend on, or Jordan Morgan ends up being a better tackle than I know you or I feel that he is right now. Yeah. So again, that's why I ultimately went with Tom. I understand that they have options there, but those options are still question marks as we are speaking right now.
More players on the list and more disagreement from Jason and I. That's next on Locked On Packers. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. Russell Henley, top 10 at the Open Championship, cashed that one. And I was so close. I was so close. Justin Rose, Tommy Fleetwood, I was so close. I was so close. I've been using FanDuel to track my favorite matchups, and there's new daily promotions, fun ways to bet. And as you can imagine, I was locked into the final round. Even though Scottie Scheffler ran away with the Open Championship, I was ready because I had other stuff on the line. New to FanDuel, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today and visit FanDuel.com to get started. Today's episode brought to you by BetterHelp. Workplace stress is at an all-time high. 61% of the global workforce is reporting higher than normal stress levels. The summer is the perfect time to take small steps to focus on your wellness and manage the challenges that come with your workday. Of course, most of us can't quit our jobs or take endless vacations, but we can start small. Whether it's getting outside for a few minutes, adding movement into our day, or talking to someone who can help you navigate life's challenges. That's where BetterHelp comes in. Therapy can help you set healthier boundaries at work so stress doesn't spill over into the rest of your life. Do you ever wish you had more time to schedule appointments? The flexibility of online therapy makes it easy to fit sessions into a busy schedule no matter where you are. As the largest online therapy provider in the world, BetterHelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a diverse variety of expertise. Unwind from work with BetterHelp. Our listeners get 10% off their first month at BetterHelp.com/lockedon. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. So let me go out of order here for a second and just say, so my number 2 was Rashawn Gary. Play out the same scenario with Rashawn Gary. Rashawn Gary goes down for 8 or 10 games. Who is playing? And what are they giving Green Bay? Like they don't, like Lucas Van Ness was a presumed answer, but we've seen him play football. And maybe I'm like overvaluing the unknown with Anthony Belton, but I just feel like if they lose Rashawn Gary, they don't have an edge player on third down that teams have to care about like at all. And I just don't know if it's the same with if Zach Tom goes down, would teams target that right tackle the same sort of way? I just don't know if that gap is the same.
So I hear you, and to a certain degree, I agree. Rashawn Gary is on my list. However, we already saw what this defense looks like without a consistent pass rush. So if Gary goes down, the pass rush is, at least based on what we've seen the last few years, probably going to suffer pretty significantly. But at the same time, they do have some answers, not necessarily in the defensive line, but elsewhere in that defensive front, including one of the players that I'm going to get to shortly. I do think there are ways that they can generate pressure without it being, the just rush for, drop everyone else in the coverage. I mean, we saw that for a for a stretch in 2024. So I think they have some schematic answers. Like they won't paper over it. Like Rashawn Gary is extremely valuable to them. He's an extremely good player. So yeah, I mean, he's on my list too. I'm not going to say that he doesn't matter, but I do think they have more ways that they can replace the production, if not necessarily replacing the player, than they can with Zach Tom. And that was one of the distinctions for me.
If Jeff Hafley could have been included on this list, where do you think he would have put him? Would he have made your top 5?
It is a very good question. Because I feel like if we're including Jeff Hafley, then are we including, Matt LaFleur with the offensive play calling?
This is why this is problematic. But
yeah, it gets a lot naughtier if you include that component. But I mean, Jeff Hafley and what he and his coaching staff have been able to do with some of the limitations they ran into last season with personnel did show that they have a lot more tricks up their sleeve. So yeah, there are things that they can do that won't completely replace, like if Rashawn Gary were to miss an extended period of time, but can replace a decent amount of that production, at least on a short-term basis. So I feel like that made him a little more fungible. Not much. He's in my top 5, but it was enough of a difference that I put him further down. Should we move on to my number 3?
Yes, but let me just cap this by saying, I think if the answer to, well, what do they do if Rashawn Gary gets hurt? If the answer is Jeff Hafley, then I feel like he probably would belong on the list, hypothetically, if we were to include him, which we're not going to. Give me your number 3.
Okay. And this was the name I had in mind when we were talking about what they would do if Rashawn Gary went down. Edgerrin Cooper, extremely valuable to this team in basically every mode of that defense. So I included these in our piece at the Leap. I'm going to throw these numbers to the audience here. So please. I'd argue, by the way, by the end of last season, you could make a really compelling argument that he was, on a down-to-down basis, their most impactful defender. That includes Xavier McKinney, who we both had as the number 1 player. So according to Pro Football Focus, Cooper finished with 23 defensive stops. That was number 2 among rookies. The number 1, Jared Verse, the defensive rookie of the year, played 343 more defensive snaps.
That's crazy.
Than Edgerrin Cooper. Now, part of that was because Cooper missed time with injury. He had the groin injury in the preseason and then the hamstring injury during the regular season. And early in the regular season, the Packers were limiting his snaps. And even with, I think he finished with, I want to say it was 491 defensive snaps and got to 23 defensive stops anyway. And I mean, he's a huge component of that run defense. And we know that the Packers run defense vastly improved in 2024. It's basically like their first quality run defense since like the Reagan administration. And you go further down, he was the 10th graded pass rusher by Pro Football Focus among anybody, not rookies, anybody with qualifying snaps. So he is materially impacting the pass rush, which again is why I think that if Rashawn Gary were to miss time, Cooper is at least part of the equation to replace that production. And to put that grade in perspective, he was sandwiched between 2 players that I think your audience probably has heard of, Nick Bosa and TJ Watt.
Yeah.
So
familiar.
This is a very impactful front 7 player, and he's also pretty good in coverage. And that's like his weakness. And I mean weakness with like scare quotes there. So this is a player that even coming out of college was more complete than I thought. I would say that most people thought. And now he's going into year 2 with a full year of this defense under his belt, with health, presumably going into the training camp. And as we learned from Matt LaFleur, with some additional weight, like good weight. So this is someone who could, by the end of this upcoming season, be their overall best defensive player, maybe their overall best player. Like the sky is really the limit with him.
By the way, for the audience, Jason does not hyperbolize with stuff like that. Like that, it is just crazy what he was able to do last year. And remember, do you have the number in front of you, the stats difference there in terms of Verse and Cooper? The number of snaps.
There was a 343 defensive snap difference between the 2.
Okay. Remember that number. Jared Verse had 11 tackles for loss last year. Edgerrin Cooper had 13 in 4 starts. So like the amount of impact plays he made last year, forget for a rookie, was remarkable. The most, like by rate, the highest graded, most positive graded plays by Pro Football Focus, 61% of his snaps last year were positively graded, the most of any linebacker, not rookie, any linebacker in the NFL. The idea that he could be, and I've been saying this for months now, the second best linebacker in the NFL as soon as this year is not at all out of the question. He was my number 3 on my list as well. And I had a feeling when you were saying, what they could do with Rashawn Gary out, I had a feeling you were thinking Edgerrin Cooper. The other part of this is, if Edgerrin Cooper goes down, who else do they have?
Exactly.
Isaiah McDuffie is just not going to impact the game anywhere near the level of Edgerrin Cooper. And we saw even last year, Isaiah McDuffie played a lot. It was in the games where Edgerrin Cooper was out there. It was you could feel the difference for him. Who is your number 4 here?
Number 4 is where I had Rashawn Gary, and obviously we had that discussion already. But I mean, really, I had some thought about what if Kenny Clark has a resurgent 2025. And even then, I feel like Rashawn Gary is still going to be the piece of that defensive line that moves it positively or negatively based on his play, based on his availability. So it's hard not to look at Rashawn Gary as being like the pivot point of that level of the defense.
Well, and maybe we'll get to Kenny Clark. Maybe he is on your list, or maybe another player at that interior spot is on your list. But if Kenny Clark does not play great, well, we saw him last year not play great. So like Devontae Wyatt, Carl Brooks, like there are other players on the interior who can at least generate some interior push. They're maybe going to be experimenting with Lucas Van Ness rushing on the inside. Remember, he started his career at Iowa as a defensive tackle. That could be part of the solution there too. Okay, so that means, and we've known this now since I didn't have Zach Tom on my list, that I have a player on my list who you do not have, who is the last player on your list.
My last player is Tucker Kraft. And it took me a while to get to this conclusion, but I kept thinking about not just what he contributes to the passing game. So we've seen those numbers. We've seen that productivity. 9.3 yards averaged after the catch last season. Basically a first down after the ball is in his hands.
Crazy.
That is crazy. But I think the underappreciated part of him is what he contributed to the run game in the red zone. You look at a lot of those, especially those Josh Jacobs touchdowns, there's Tucker Kraft clearing out a lane, especially at the second level, if they weren't like right up against the goal line, that makes those plays work. Like some of those touchdowns are basically Tucker Kraft plays, even though he will not appear on the stat sheet. So you combine with what he was as a pass catcher, what he was as a run blocker, and he's a pretty capable pass blocker too when they do keep him in. And the fact that they apparently want to prioritize him in the passing game this season, if you talk to Matt LaFleur, Jordan Love, and I feel like there's a variety of receivers that could make an impact. And we certainly have talked about them extensively. The rookies that they drafted, the guys who are returning, Jaden Reed, Dontavian Wicks, Romeo Doubs, Christian Watson when he gets back. So there's a lot of names there. So I feel like if hypothetically Matthew Golden has a quiet rookie year, they have other guys there. And you can say the same thing about like Romeo Doubs or Dontavian Wicks. Like there's just a lot of depth there. So from a pure value standpoint, it's a little harder to separate it. Whereas at tight end, they do have Luke Musgrave, but he does not contribute in the blocking nearly in the same way that Kraft does. He's not a terrible blocker, and he certainly tries, but he doesn't move people the way that Tucker Kraft does.
Did you just bless his heart, Luke Musgrave?
I might have, yes. And we do have to bless his organs based on what's happened in the first 2 years. But Tucker Kraft is as complete of a player as they have among the skill position players. And I think he's in for the best season of his career, health permitting, and he really has not missed time to injury. So I feel like if they lost him, they would certainly lose something in the passing game. Just the numbers tell you that. There's just a lot of productivity, over 700 yards, all those touchdowns just wiped off the board. Musgrave could contribute in some capacity in that degree, but we haven't seen him stay on the field enough for at least me right now to trust that he would do that in 2025, even if some of those health concerns were fluky. And they would lose that element in blocking in the run game. Like they just don't have another tight end who can do that. And it's so critical to everything they want to do on offense, not just the running game, not just the passing game, the way those two things are married. It's hard to see that all operating at the level that it has without Tucker Kraft there.
So I wanted to put Tucker Kraft on the list because I feel like this year he could be the number one offensive player on this list. But I did factor in Luke Musgrave, and I also felt like we saw this offense in 2023 with just sort of like a version of Tucker Kraft, like when he was a rookie and still figuring everything out, and the offense was still really good. So I did not have Tucker Kraft on my list, even if I think he's going to be outstanding, but I did have 2 offensive players on my list. So, we're not done yet. More players and still more disagreement because, well, that's just the way these lists work. run out of players. I have to have some guys that he doesn't have, and he has some guys that I don't have. So we'll have to talk about that next on Locked On Packers. Guys, you've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them. But if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rougiette Ready. Rougiette Ready is a next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Unlike the usual pills that can take hours, Rougiette's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and kicks in fast, on average in 15 minutes. Plus, effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can stay confident and in control when the moment is right. I love that it's completely online. Rougiette connects you with board-certified doctors and ships your treatments discreetly to your door. If traditional options haven't worked, Rougiette might be the answer. Over 150,000 men have already made the switch. Head to Rougiette.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL to get 15% off today. That's RUGIET.com/LockedOnNFL and use promo code LockedOnNFL for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing review. Please visit the Rougiette website for full safety information. So my number 4 player is Jayden Reed. And the reason is I don't think they have anyone who can do the things for this offense for sure that Jayden Reed can do. And I don't mean just playing in the slot. I mean the schemed up touches. Yeah, they drafted someone to do that. We have no idea if he has any ability to do any of that consistently. And he was their zone killer last year. He was, and you wrote about this for the Leap early last year. He was their number 1 receiver. He was doing everything that they had asked number 1 receivers to do. He was, by catch percentage, True Media's number 1 player against zone coverage last year, 4th in terms of yards. He was the engine for that passing game in a lot of ways. And I feel like if he went down, I mean, what would they even do? Like, who would they play in the slot? Maybe Matthew Golden, maybe Dontavian Wicks, maybe Tucker Kraft. But I don't know what the answer is if Jayden Reed is not out there, because the creativity that we saw, especially when like Malik Willis was the quarterback, how much of the offense was Jayden Reed pilled? He was the offense, and with Josh Jacobs, and I just feel like losing him would be such a blow for this team. I don't know where they would go.
Jayden Reed certainly was their answer for everything for a stretch early in the season. That's what we wrote at the Leap on multiple occasions. So I don't want to take that away from him. And I also feel like some of the like regression discussion that has fallen on him is a little bit overblown. Like I know the drops were a huge problem. He also didn't drop that many passes as a rookie. I think that's going to regress to the
mean. Did not have a problem with drops in college either. So he's not someone that I feel like is a volatile catcher. Dontavian Wicks is like this is just going to be who Dontavian Wicks is, I think.
But again, because of the amount of receivers they have, and we've seen Wicks and Dobbs, and at times Christian Watson, when he comes back, play from the slot. Matthew Golden, we certainly can, like, we haven't seen him do it in the NFL because he hasn't played yet, but like, that's not a hard thing to project. And it's not that I have confidence that any one of those guys is going to be able to do exactly what Jayden Reed could. But there's enough of those guys who have proven production in the NFL, who have shown that versatility, that I feel like they'd be able to find something. And that also, by the way, and you made this point, includes Tucker Kraft. I think that's actually something they're going to do, not because Jayden Reed might go down, but because Tucker Kraft can probably create some huge mismatch advantages for the Packers in that role. So that was the distinction for me. I don't think it's inarguable that it is Jayden Reed. I think we're probably underrating what Reed did last year and what he will be going forward. Like, is he going to be a top 10 receiver in the league at some point in his career? It's hard to envision that. It's not impossible, but it's hard. But can he be one of those players that is consistently in that like 10 to 20 range? That is not just on the table for his career. That's on the table this upcoming season. Like, we've seen him for a prolonged stretch, for like a month stretch, be not just the most productive receiver on the Packers, one of the most productive receivers in the league. Like, it's easy to forget now because of what happened later on in the year, but September and October, Jayden Reed was one of the most productive players in the NFL at basically any position. So if he's able to do something like that without the drops, we're talking about a player with a much higher ceiling than I think the general narrative around him is.
Yeah, and I guess if I'm being consistent, I can't say Zach Tom does not belong on the list because of Jordan Morgan and Anthony Belton, and also have Jaden Reed when they have Matthew Golden and Savion Williams, even though, of course, we don't know what those players are. I'm kind of making the same argument to keep Zach Tom off, to have Jaden Reed. It just feels different to me just because I think the gadget stuff is so specific to Reed, and Matt LaFleur seems so willing and he seems to desire to want to do those kinds of things with Jaden Reed. We didn't see Matthew Golden do that at Texas. We did see Savion Williams a little bit, but that's why it's a little different to me. The fifth player here, do you want to guess?
Well, we've already talked about the defensive line. I don't think you're going to choose Kenny Clark. I'm pretty confident you're not going to choose one of the other linebackers. I think it comes down to either Josh Jacobs or, I guess, Elton Jenkins.
So those were the two players I was debating for my final spot, and I went with Josh Jacobs. And I did because he was incredibly productive last year. And the offensive blocking structure was not really that great. Like, it still was not what you would want. And there's a reason they went out and got Aaron Banks. And it was to get a little nastier, get a little more powerful downhill. Last year, in terms of running backs who played at least as many snaps as Josh Jacobs, and there weren't that many, only Derrick Henry had more yards after contact per attempt than Josh Jacobs.
Is that good, Peter? That sounds good.
It does seem like if only Derrick Henry is doing the thing, then you probably did pretty well. Also, when he came to Green Bay, I was not worried. I wondered how many explosive runs can he really create? Because there were at times over his NFL career, he did not seem like an explosive runner. Only Jahmyr Gibbs, Derrick Henry, and Saquon Barkley created more 10-plus yard runs last year than Josh Jacobs. So if you're going to create, you have to be able to create explosives to be a valuable modern running back. When you think of what that Malik Willis offense looked like, the single wing, all the crazy stuff that they were doing. And then in the playoff game against the Eagles, when there was nothing left, it was hand the ball to Josh Jacobs, throw the ball to Josh Jacobs. That was the offense. We don't know what Marshawn Lloyd is. I like Emmanuel Wilson, even though I can't spell his name right on the first try. I like Chris Brooks. They are not anywhere near as good as Josh Jacobs. So I like that. That was why I feel like he belongs here. Even if, like, I don't love running back value positionally in general, I just feel like he was so good last year. And maybe it's just like he exceeded my expectations enough that it colored my opinion of him. But I feel like when we saw in 2023, when Aaron Jones was hurt, what did they do? They kind of just stopped running the ball. They were just like, Jordan Love, can you just go do it? Can you just go do the thing? We're going to get an empty and we're just going to fling it. And I kind of think that that's what they would do if Josh Jacobs missed extended time this year.
So I'm going to actually add to this. You already mentioned how many explosive runs that Josh Jacobs had. Do you want to guess how many explosive receptions he had?
I mean, I would no, tell me.
All right. The answer is 5, which was 5th on the entire team. And this was an explosive offense. And like, not all of those obviously were like, actually, I would imagine very few, if any of them, were like down the field passes, but that he took them further. Maybe some of them were screens. There were a few plays they had like that. But the point is, they can use him in that way, right?
I'm trying to remember a down the field pass from him. Did he run a wheel route all year?
He might have. I'm thinking more of like, they had some of those, like, there's the fake screen to set up the real screen kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I know Josh Jacobs was a part of that, both in terms of the fake and the real. But yeah, 5 receptions of 20 or more yards that finished only, in terms of the team, only behind Jaden Reed, Christian Watson, Tucker Kraft, which again, I think folds into my argument earlier about Tucker Kraft, and Romeo Doubs. Those are all receivers and a tight end that we know averages basically a first down every time he touches the ball, just on the yardage he gets after the catch. So that's a pretty good context for the way we can evaluate. That's just his value as a receiver, not even the main stuff as a running back. So I thought about him too. At one point he was on my list and I ended up just coming off of it. But if we were extending this to even like 7, he's on there.
Yeah, I think he probably has to be. Do you feel good about where we landed here?
Yeah, I think so. I think this really encapsulates that. Yeah, the Packers may not, as we understand them right now, have like big name superstar talent relative to a lot of the other Super Bowl contenders, but there's a lot of really good talent on this team, some of which might become that like all pro, big name, everyone and their mother knows about that player kind of talent in 2025.
Yeah, I think the two names that I have to believe you're thinking of, Tucker Kraft and Edgerrin Cooper, are guys who absolutely, we talked about it the other day, the players who raised the ceiling the most for the Packers. I think those two guys, I believe both of those guys were on the list that we put together there. So Jason, appreciate the time as always, and we'll talk to you soon.
Take care, Peter.
All right, thanks to Jason for joining the show. Always great to talk with him. I have a new piece for The Leap out today. It's not player rankings, but it's a great way to get you ready for training camp. So go subscribe, theleap.football. We'll be back tomorrow because that's what we do here on Locked On Packers. Follow me on the social medias. Follow the podcast on the social medias. Subscribe wherever you get podcasts. Subscribe on YouTube so you can stay Locked On Packers.